On some nights, the silence feels heavier than sound. No laughter, no music, just the wind moving through dirt roads and empty fields. In the early South, nights like that carried stories. Stories about fear. Stories about things people could not explain. When a man played music that felt too powerful, too skilled, too different, people didn't ask how he learned. They asked who helped him. And when the answer made them uncomfortable, they created another one. They said talent like that had a source. A dark one. They said no black man could change music that deeply without paying a price. They said greatness always comes with a debt. For decades, one name has stood at the center of that belief. A man remembered less for his life and more for a rumor. Tonight is not about superstition. It is about how fear rewrites history, how myths replace truth, and how one young blues musician became a symbol instead of a human being. Before the Crossroads became a legend, it was just a road. Before the devil entered the story, there was a boy trying to survive. And that story deserves to be told. Robert Johnson was born into a world that did not forgive mistakes. Mississippi in the early 1900s was a place where survival mattered more than dreams. His life began with instability. His biological father was gone before he ever learned his name. The man who raised him carried another name, another history, and another set of problems. Land ownership brought danger. Black success attracted attention that could turn deadly. Threats forced disappearances. Names were changed not for ambition, but for protection. By the time Robert was old enough to understand, home was never permanent. Families moved. Doors closed. Certainty never stayed long. Music entered his life quietly. Not through lessons, not through schools, but through observation. He listened. Radios carried voices from far away. Juke joints carried stories no church would repeat. Men played guitars that sounded like conversations with pain itself. Robert wanted that sound. He learned the only way he could. By watching hands. By copying movements. By creating instruments from scraps when nothing else was available. A wire. A bottle. A wall. That was enough. But in his world, blues music carried a stigma. It was blamed for pulling men away from work. Away from family. Away from faith. To many, it represented temptation. And temptation was always linked to something darker. His stepfather did not approve. He wanted Robert in the fields, picking cotton, following the path already laid out. Robert refused. That refusal came with consequences. As a teenager, he married a young girl named Virginia Travis. For her, he tried to abandon music. He took work in the fields. He did what was expected of a husband. Then everything collapsed. Virginia died during childbirth. So did their baby. By the time Robert arrived, both were already gone. There were no words for that kind of loss. Only blame. Her family pointed at the guitar. They called it the reason. They said the music brought death with it. Robert walked away with grief heavier than anything he had known. And once again, music was the only thing that answered. He followed older bluesmen. He listened more than he spoke. He tried to play. And when he finally stepped on stage, the reaction was brutal. Laughter. Boos. Dismissal. Humiliated, Robert disappeared. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. And when silence finally broke, it would change everything. When Robert Johnson came back, he did not announce himself. He simply walked into town, picked up a guitar, and played. The same rooms that once laughed at him fell silent. What people heard did not make sense to them. It sounded complete, as if rhythm, melody, and bass were happening at the same time. His fingers moved independently. One hand told the story, the other answered it. People leaned forward. They searched the corners of the room. Some swore they heard two guitars. But there was only one man. The change was too sudden, too dramatic. Months earlier, he could barely keep time. Now he controlled it. He could hear a song once and repeat it exactly. He could slide between notes like a voice bending words. He could make the guitar breathe. No one wanted to hear about practice. No one wanted to hear about discipline. They wanted a reason that felt easier. That is when the story appeared. They talked about a crossroads. A lonely road late at night. A man dressed in black. A guitar tuned by unseen hands. The story spread because it fit the fear. But there was another version, spoken quietly. Some said Robert spent his missing months learning. Learning obsessively. Learning from anyone willing to teach. They said he practiced until his fingers bled. That he played where no one complained about noise. That he treated the guitar like survival itself. Even those explanations fed the legend. Graveyards. Isolation. Midnight sessions. People heard what they wanted to hear. What could not be denied was this. Robert Johnson was now the most dangerous guitarist in the Delta. He moved constantly, from Mississippi to Arkansas, from small towns to smaller rooms. He played for coins, for drinks, for a place to sleep. Musicians watched him carefully. Some copied him, others avoided him. Eventually, his sound reached the right ears. A record store owner heard something special. Introductions were made. A chance to record followed. Not in luxury, not with protection, but it was enough. In those small recording rooms, Robert captured something rare. Songs that carried fear. Songs that carried desire. Songs that carried loneliness without asking permission. He turned his back while recording. Not out of superstition. Out of control. He wanted the sound to bounce. To surround him. To trap the listener. In a short time, he recorded nearly 30 songs. He was paid once. In cash. No royalties. No future promises. Still, he believed his voice had finally escaped the Delta. He did not know the price of being heard, or how close the end really was. Success never settled around him. It passed through. He kept moving, town to town, night to night. The applause was small. The money was smaller. And danger followed wherever he stayed too long. Robert Johnson lived without protection. No contracts. No managers. No one to step between him and trouble. He trusted the road. And the road is never kind. Women were drawn to him, not because he promised anything, but because his music said what many men never could. That attention came with consequences. Jealous husbands watched. Rumors spread. Warnings were ignored. By the summer of 1938, Robert was playing at a small club near Greenwood, Mississippi. The room was familiar. The crowd was comfortable. The night felt routine. What he did not know was that the owner of the club had reason to hate him. During a break, Robert reached for a bottle of corn liquor. It had already been opened. Someone nearby tried to stop him. He drank anyway. Not long after, his body reacted violently. Pain twisted his stomach. His strength faded. Blood followed. He tried to stand. He tried to finish the set. He couldn't. Friends carried him away from the music, away from the crowd, away from help. For 2 days, he suffered. There was no hospital prepared to save a black man in that condition. There was no medicine made available to him. On August 16, 1938, Robert Johnson died. He was 27 years old. No investigation followed. No justice arrived. Only stories. Some said poison. Some said mothballs mixed into the liquor. Others returned to the old explanation. They said the devil had come to collect. Even in death, the myth refused to let him rest. He was buried without ceremony, without certainty. Different towns claimed him. Different churches marked the ground. That was not unusual. Many black lives ended without records, without markers, without names carved in stone. What made his death different was what followed. He was gone just as opportunity finally appeared. Invitations were coming. Larger stages were possible. The road ended one step before everything could change. And once again, the legend was louder than the loss. While he was alive, Robert Johnson was barely noticed outside the places he played. His music stayed trapped in small rooms. His name traveled slowly. Then years passed. America changed. Music changed. And suddenly, people were listening for something older. In 1961, his recordings were reissued. Not as history, but as discovery. Young musicians heard something they had never been taught. Emotion without polish. Technique without rules. Stories told without apology. His influence spread quietly at first. From record players to rehearsal rooms. From America to Europe. White musicians spoke his name with reverence. They studied his songs. They borrowed his style. They called him a master. And once again, the myth followed. Media leaned into the story of the Crossroads. The deal. The darkness. It was easier than explaining poverty. Easier than explaining racism. Easier than explaining why a black man could be forgotten while alive and celebrated in death. America turned Robert Johnson into a mystery instead of a man. Institutions eventually followed. Lists were written. Awards were given. Halls of fame opened their doors. Recognition arrived decades too late. Across the world, his name became a foundation of modern music. Blues musicians honored him. Rock musicians credited him. Historians debated him. But the conversation often missed the point. The question was never whether he made a deal. The real question was why America needed that story to feel comfortable with his greatness. Robert Johnson became a mirror. a reflection of how talent is treated when it comes from the margins. His music survived because it told the truth, even when the story around it did not. Robert Johnson did not leave behind wealth. He did not leave behind property. He did not even leave behind certainty about where he rests. What he left was sound, a voice captured in fragile recordings, a guitar that spoke fear, longing, pride, and survival. Music that carried the weight of a life lived without protection. For years, people argued about how he became so good. They argued about crossroads instead of cotton fields, about demons instead of discipline, about deals instead of desperation. But the truth is quieter than the myth. He lived in a time when black talent was consumed, not protected. A time when ownership was rare and credit was delayed. A time when a man could change the course of music and still die without a doctor willing to help him. Robert Johnson did not disappear because of superstition. He disappeared because the world he lived in made disappearing easy. And yet, his music refused to vanish. Long after his death, it found new listeners. It crossed oceans he never saw. It reached stages he never stood on. His influence lives in every bend of a blues note, in every guitar solo that tells a story instead of showing off, in every artist who plays as if their life depends on it. The legend of the Crossroads still follows him. But maybe that says more about us than it does about him. Because believing in a deal with the devil is easier than accepting this. That a young black man from Mississippi reshaped American music with nothing but skill, pain, and persistence. He was 27 when his life ended. But his work never stopped traveling. If you listen closely, you will hear it. Not a bargain. Not a curse. Just a man playing the truth the only way he knew how. If this story changed how you hear his music, take a moment to listen again. And if it made you think about how legends are created, share your thoughts below. Every voice matters.